Hey, and welcome to Comic Sans. Today on the Comic Roundtable, we've got three great books. First up is going to be Doomsday Clock from DC. Then we've got an independent publisher called Huckleberry Comics bringing us a new title, Dream State Radicals.
And last but not least, we're going to discuss the hottest property for Marvel right now, the Black Panther. And in our utility belt, for you new and returning comic book readers, we're going to discuss local comic book clubs.
And if that's not enough, we have an exclusive interview here on Comic Sans with AMC's Ming Chen from Comic Book Men. So let's dive right in.
Don't you know that you're a grown-up? No games, no puns. Not allowed if you're a grown-up.
Hey, welcome to GenXGrownUp. I'm George, and I am a GenXGrownUp.
Hi, I'm Jason, and I'm also a Gen X grown-up. And this is episode 5 of Comic Sans. We're in the new Gen X grown-up studio here in Tallahassee, Florida.
That's right, Jason. But, enough about us. Let's jump right into Comic Roundtable.
First up is Doomsday Clock from DC. This is a new maxi series by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. This story starts out 7 years after the original events of Watchmen, and the intent is to bring in the Watchmen characters into the DC universe.
Yeah, and Jason, when I was reading the first issue of this book, I was completely taken back to the Watchmen. I mean, the artwork, the cover, the layout, all that stuff is extremely close, if not near perfect, to Watchmen, at least from my viewpoint. What do you think?
I agree, George. I think that the 9-panel layout is exactly what they did in the first Watchmen.
Yeah.
And it just really draws you into the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to point out something that you mentioned at the beginning when you were introducing Doomsday Clock. You called it a maxi series. Now, for me, back in my day, they were always called limited series, no matter whether they were 12 issues, 7 issues, 10 issues. What's the deal with maxi series? Is that different now? What's going to happen?
Well, what it is a limited series is a series with a finite number of issues.
Okay, all right.
Maxi series are for a series that are 12 issues or more.
Oh, really?
And a mini series is less than 12 issues.
So maxi series is 12 issues or more, but it's still going to end in a relatively, it's not an ongoing.
Yeah, finite.
So if you grew up collecting comics back in my day, this will kind of educate you when people are talking about mini, limited, maxi series. You'll kind of understand a little bit about what you're getting into. What about how they're publishing this book? Is it going to be different? Because they started off going hot and furious, or fast and furious. What are they doing now?
Yeah, they were going real strong with the book. It originally intended to be monthly. It was recently announced that it was going to go on hiatus for 2 months.
Okay.
March and April. Pick back up in May and go on a bi-monthly schedule.
Wow,
so it'll be every other month.
It's going to move on into the next year.
It'll be next July before it's done.
All right, so we've got a great series. It's essentially, the whole storyline is that it was the Watchmen, it's something in their group that brings about the rebirth storyline in DC, which kind of got away from DC's New 52 when DC was having all kinds of issues with that.
Right.
They said, we got to relaunch, let's go with rebirth. But they never explained how rebirth happened.
No.
That's what Doomsday Clock is going to do for us.
Doomsday Clock's going to explain, I believe, a little bit about what's going on with rebirth. There was hints at the beginning of Watchmen influence.
Sure.
And so we'll see where it goes. But this series definitely starts out as a true Watchmen sequel.
That's awesome. Now, I don't want to give too much away because this is a new ongoing series, and I want our viewers to be able to go and watch it. So let's just jump right into our ratings. What do you give it for your ratings?
Well, I love the original.
Sure.
But this one is very good.
Okay.
And I, right off the bat, 3 issues in, I give it 4.5 tokens.
I can't argue with that any. I would have to go with 4.5 tokens out of 5 myself. I mean, it's topical. It's addressing a concern that we had for DC. Where did rebirth come from? And it's beautifully drawn and laid out. The writing is top notch. I couldn't be happier. So if you haven't checked out Doomsday Clock, run, don't walk to your local comic book store and pick yourself up a copy. All right, next up on Comic Roundtable, Jason, we've got a book from an independent publisher, Huckleberry Comics. It's called Dream State Radicals. Now, the basic story is it's set in the future There's technology that's, of course, there's rich people and poor people and all levels in between. And there are some drugs that are being dealt, the standard kind of future drugs that you might think of, but also there are drugs that are based around people's dreams. Somehow they've learned to record dreams, and these are then shared via this drug network that, of course, the military state is trying to suppress. There's all this cool stuff. What did you think about things like the art in this book?
Well, the art was interesting. I thought the landscape and background design was fantastic. It looked like Blade Runner.
Exactly, like we were talking. Yeah,
and
Blade
I
Runner.
had just watched the new Blade Runner, so that was fresh on my mind when I read it. So that was great. The character designs were a little scratchy to me, the way the figures looked. So it didn't really grab me as far as the character design, but the overall look of the world was fantastic to me.
Right. Now, and we should point out that we've only got the one issue is the only one that's been released. The publisher was kind enough to send us a proof of issue number 2. And we noticed that the art got a little bit different. It looks like they switched to some different artists in the second issue. So I think when you guys see the first issue compared to the second issue, you'll notice that there's a big change.
Right, and the second issue was better for me as far as art and story goes. With that improvement and change, there was a big difference.
Yeah, and I really love the story there.
Right.
But issue number 2 definitely landed a lot more solidly for me. I think they spelled out a lot of new characters as well as solidifying the characters introduced in the first book.
Right, I agree. I think with the art and more story and background in the second issue, you get more information.
So whatever you guys do, make sure that, I think on this one, you're going to either have to go to your local comic book store and ask them to order this book, or you might even have to go to Huckleberry's website. We'll have that down in the links down below and order it directly from them. But this is absolutely a good book, especially if you're a fan of sci-fi movies like Blade Runner. All right, Jason, what do you give this book?
Well, I like the design and the concept of the book. I'm going to have to give it, though, 2.5 tokens. I'm still kind of waiting and seeing where it's going to go. Okay,
so a little on the low side, but kind of in that middle range. Right. That's fair enough. I personally liked it an awful lot, so I'm probably going to go with 4 tokens out of 5. For me, it really hit that one little thread, growing up with Blade Runner. This movie kind of scratched that itch for me, so to speak.
Many of you know that there's a movie coming out, a small independent film from Marvel.
Yeah, it's probably not going to get a lot of traction, but what is it? It's like, was it like Turquoise Lion or something like that?
Black Panther.
Black Panther. I knew it was a color and a big cat. Yes, okay. We're talking about Black Panther.
Yeah, I think you've heard of it.
So, we decided to go a little bit back in time. What book did we pull?
Well, we went with one that's from 1998.
Right.
By Christopher Priest. We went with the trade paperback.
Yes, and that's very important because, as we always preach here on Comic Sans, when you can, grab the trade paperback because it's going to be cheaper, and you can get a whole storyline in one big book, which is really nice, especially with today's $3 and $5 books.
Right, and this trade paperback is 17 issues. So it's
like a giant trade paperback, and it's really good. They've got them, of course, they're on sale right now with Marvel and Comixology, and your local comic book store, I guarantee you, is going to have some Black Panther stuff out there. As you can see, we grabbed some Black Panther stuff from our local comic book store, the Bookshelf 2. Now, we haven't talked about that yet, but the Bookshelf 2 here in Tallahassee, Florida is what supports us, and so we support them by mentioning them every episode. They gave us some of this great Black Panther stuff, some of these books that you see around. Tell us a little bit about this trade paperback.
All right, so this trade paperback starts with King T'Challa, also known as the Black Panther, coming to America to solve a mystery involving a charity that he helped fund, while his country of Wakanda is in turmoil. Yeah, and it's really interesting. They get him out of his country by setting up a plot where a little girl is murdered, and it goes on into that. Now, I'm going to talk just a little bit about the language in this book, because that was important to me. It was very interesting when I noticed that there were 2 characters, at least in the first few issues, that I focused in on a lot. There was T'Challa, Black Panther, obviously, that's who you're going to focus in on first. But then there was also this like FBI type guy, white guy and everything. What I found very interesting, and
this is in 1998, so I thought this was really neat the way they did this. The Black Panther character, T'Challa, he's very proper with his speech patterns. He is very, like, Ivy League with his speech patterns. The other guy tries to act like he's in the hood, and I was like, no, that doesn't work, but the juxtaposition of those two characters makes you think outside the box a little bit.
Right.
I thought that was really nice.
What that is, I read into it, and Black Panther wasn't on top in 1998. He was overshadowed by the other Avengers. He couldn't hold the title down.
Sure.
And so Christopher Priest comes along and starts writing this, has free reign, and creates Everett Ross, who is the liaison.
Right.
That you're referring to.
Right.
And he's kind of our lens into T'Challa and Black Panther. And he also is modeled after Chandler from Friends, which is a 90s reference.
You told me about that, and I was like, that's so interesting. That's who would think that a comic book would mirror a sitcom of the day? But that's really neat. We liked the art in this trade paperback. Right. In some of the trailers and things, there are definitely some elements plucked from this series that seem to be being used in the film.
I believe so. I've read a lot about it, and this...
Marvel tends to do that. They find some storylines that are interesting. Captain America Civil War, they pluck some stuff out of that. And then they throw them into these films to make the films interesting. So there are parts from the books, but if you read the book, you're not spoiling the movie. So absolutely, if you want to find out some stuff about Black Panther, this trade paperback from 1998 by Christopher Priest, 17 issues, a whole complete storyline, great writing, very good art. What's your rating for Black Panther?
I really enjoyed this. I read it on Comixology. I plowed through it in a weekend. I give it 4 tokens.
Okay, fair enough. I'm not going to argue with you. It's your first time in Comic Sans. I'm going to say 4 tokens out of 5 as well. So we're going to present a united front. I think that this is a great book. Please go grab this from your local comic book store as soon as you can.
Today in the Utility Belt, we're going to discuss local comic book clubs. And I belong to one, the Tallahassee Comic Book Club.
That's right. And it was that Tallahassee Comic Book Club that brought you and I together in kind of a roundabout way, right?
That's right.
The bigger focus of this Utility Belt segment is the comic book club that you belong to. Tell us a little bit about that.
All right, so I've enjoyed it for the past 4 years, close to 4 years. We meet once a month, and actually it started at a con.
Okay.
A couple of guys decided to do a club, had a table, passed out flyers, and that's where it birthed
Sure.
from. Yeah.
All right.
So we meet once a month at a restaurant and talk comic books, sometimes trade, borrow,
of course.
Sell, and we talk other stuff besides comic books. Talk about pop culture,
as
movies,
people do, right?
music,
You're not going to focus on just one subject.
Comic books, but yeah, it's a fun group, and we've branched out.
Okay.
We now go on day trips together to local comic book to other comic book shows.
There are going to be people that are watching this that don't live in Tallahassee.
Right.
We've got a worldwide audience at GenXGrownUp.com. So how are people going to find their local comic book club? That's kind of important now. The way that I found you guys was through Jeff at the comic book shop, right?
Right.
So go to your local comic book shop, ask your local comic book shop owner. They're going to be able to hook you up. You can also search for you guys on the web, right?
Right, we're on Facebook.
Sure. We'll put some links down in the notes down below. Now, if you don't have a local comic book club, there is one other thing you can do. There's a website called meetup.com. Now, they are not endorsing our video, have given us no money in any way, shape, or form, but a friend of mine uses meetup.com to set up meetings where she hosts board game sessions at her house. People come over and they play Risk and Monopoly and all different kinds of board games. And she set that up through meetup.com. It's totally free. It's easy to set up. People do the same thing for comic books. They do it for role-playing gatherings. So if you can't find a local comic book club in your area, why don't you go on meetup.com and create your own? Tell us about it in the comments down below, and maybe we can feature you guys in our next couple of Comic Sans episodes.
Sounds good.
And we've got one final segment on today's Comic Sans episode. We've actually got an exclusive interview with AMC's comic book men, Ming Chen. So let's check that out. we wanted to spend some time with you today, ask you a couple of questions about your mini comic adventures.
Fire away. I love the name GenXGrownUp. That describes me perfectly.
Absolutely. See, same with us.
It's an interesting story. How and when did I come to work at Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash? Back in 1995, a year after Kevin's first movie Clerks came out, I saw it. It came out on VHS. I was working at a video store at the time. We got one copy in, and I had heard from a friend that the movie, that Clerks, was awesome and that I should see it. He tried to get me to go see it with him at the movie theater, and I read the synopsis and I saw the first words on there were black and white. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna see some black and white movie. Like, why couldn't this guy afford like color film? Like, how good could this be if he couldn't even afford color film? So I didn't see it until it came out on VHS a year later, and I needed a way to channel that fandom somewhere, and at the time I was learning how to create websites, so I decided to make a Clerks fan website, and Kevin saw it about a month or so later and gave me a call, asked me, he was like, hey man, I saw what you did to the Clerks site, could you like do that but bigger? Because I'm going to be making more movies. Like, could you make a website for like my whole production company? And so I did, and that's how I met Kevin. He opened up the store about a year or two later, and ended up moving out to Jersey to work with him. Ooh man, that's tough. I have a lot of stuff. Comic books. I mean, I gotta go with the Avengers. The Avengers 214 was the very first comic book I ever owned. Some kid gave it to me when I was in first grade. You know, I think most kids fall in love with like maybe one character when they're little. I fell in love with like 18 of them. So you know, the Avengers, you got Cap, you had Iron Man, and they had all the villains like Ghost Rider, and you know, you have some of the Avengers you haven't seen in the movies. You know, like Tigra, and just Wasp, you know, Wasp, some of the other ones, and collectibles.
I know I've seen some good ones on the show that you've been interested in.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a G.I. Joe guy, so you know what, and the biggest G.I. Joe collectible is the USS Flag, the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier that came out in about 1984. It's a 7-foot plastic aircraft carrier.
And you own one.
I do own one, yeah, which is pretty crazy. They don't make toys like that anymore. No. They don't make them that big. They don't make them that detailed. They don't make them that fun anymore, in my opinion. I know I sound old right now, but they just don't.
That's part of the Gen X grown-up nostalgia, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
or they just don't put that kind of detail. If you pick up an old G.I. Joe toy, you'll see, like, you know, gaskets. You know, they're not real gaskets, but they're molded in there in the plastic, and you'll see threading on, like, bolts. And, you know, you'll see bolts, like, you know, individual little tiny bolts on there.
It's not stuff you can take apart and manipulate.
Yeah, right. But it's pretty cool attention to detail. I mean, I definitely noticed it as a kid, and I most definitely notice it now. Probably I spent a lot of time watching TV. So all those great TV shows back then, the fact that you know, that me and my friends, the guys at the stash mainly, that we can quote them forwards and backwards, is at the same time useless, but it got us to where we are now, and it kind of got us a TV show. So, you know, we'll go as far back as, say, the $6 Billion Man, and, you know, the time he fought Bigfoot, and how they crossed over the episodes with the Bionic Woman, and then how, you know, 30 years later we got to meet the Bionic Woman. Like, that's cool. But, you know, and then I'll go, I'm an 80s kid, so, you know, we Alf, Different Strokes, Airwolf, Knight Rider. I mean, the list goes on. Dukes of Hazzard, The Incredible Hulk. I mean, it's such a huge list. I think my life was shaped around TV. I didn't really go to the movies a lot as a kid. My parents just didn't take me. You know, I would go once in a while with friends, but I didn't go like every week. And we didn't get a VHS player until much later on. But, you know, TV was free, and I camped out. I was, you know, on Saturdays, I'd get up at 6 o'clock so I could watch the Super Friends.
Get your cereal.
Get the cereal, and that would go all day. And Friday nights were you know, Incredible Hulk, Dukes of Hazzard nights, and you know, that it went from there. But I watched a lot of TV as a kid, and thank God I did, because it definitely worked out.
And that'll do it for our latest episode of Comic Sand. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
Let's see you guys later.
Don't you know that you're a grown-up?
Subscribe to Gen X Grown Up by clicking right here and enable notifications so you won't miss a thing. Use the comments down below to tell us what you think, and while you're there, a thumbs up would be great too. Please share this online wherever you hang out. Connect with GXG on social networks by clicking right here.
Basically, life sucks as a grown-up.